vaccines. So black pupils and whites of eyes, we have these colors and we have exceptions, communicated answers to us and truths on not used for lies, not used to screen lies. But we have other being having been pretended science about this. It has self-value, uses of descriptions of cities, for example, blaming the causes of where and how they are tactically denatured, and people could get away with denying that because everyone is first blaming and having blamed other things, others themselves, for the causes of that. Otherwise, that body was sensed, including if they are a majority of people. Per uses of collusion /S with this only known at all locations /S. And then that was sustained to further lie progressions and cause would that cause keep people in styles keeping it blamed on other things, other /S or on selves, rather than on the breaching method what our founders communicated to blame it on. They communicated for us not to forget how they did not have free speech and they had to force the other founders to pretend to be motivations for why everyone's forced free speech naturally, but there are exceptions made, as we know today, because they never went away because we never addressed them originally. They have celebrities who make opinions about drugs, and they use truths for lies regarding the descriptions of it. Also has collusions increasingly on our forensics locations and with the family members and intimate ties of police chiefs and people associated with the lawyers of the police chiefs and the agencies and their roles with a whole bunch of different countries at the same time, with detectives, families, the way they raise them from kids to adults as voices for /voicings for the law, criminally foreign influence and tactically delusions raw. I'm not a lawyer. We don't have to be lawyers to discern this. We have to have black pupils, whites of eyes, and understanding of the breaching method and of James Madison's plan and the founders behind him, and how George Washington agreed to help them and use that plan. And we have to understand how no one allows that honesty about George Washington's extortion. And we have to understand dishonesty with uses of words like success and roles with it to measure and maintain left out all the hyper evidential and evidences associated with the cities where it is concentrated. The same breaching method that is manifest at suburbs that were designed for the torture, extortion, slavery method, still recorded force blamed on other things, others ourselves, and what it causes and caused, blamed on other things, others ourselves. And the differences between roles with that is also used. And this is preventing how it is functional, how there is a distinct identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible that comes with languages and the sciences, for example. The predicate, the verbs, different names for verbs for this reason, to discern this too. The reason we need more than one name for verb is because there's a hyper-evident, hyper-invisible but still discernible, also volume science. As this one has not just a humanity species volume, simultaneous species body of individual body with grouped difference, singular, slash S, singular by that identity of hypersimultaneous, its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that equally only increasing because we only have an extent of its complete identity to discern. But wherever we have the extent of a subject individually grouped it together, it is inseparable from all finite grouped and simultaneous parts of that thing. Individually grouped together that way, too, 3 different ways. 1/3/5. And the value of the difference between how 3 ways bound and how 5 ways bound, contemplation of it, that contemplation is also value to what causes positive value nature progressions, acts in nature of the kind that are everywhere at once. It also wants us to check if it's that kind or not. And it also answers us questions, gives us revelations by checking that way. By identity of the hypersimultaneous. So we could discern it left out with the breaching method itself as a scientific value being and having been left out whenever it makes. Now, there are excuses why individual leaders do this because they have information about declassified information. Some of it is not even a real secret. It's just that they have a whole bunch of different countries pretending to be integrity together on campuses and off campuses. And they agreed where there are negatives and positives, they have collusions with that to keep the identity of the breaching method from being discerned without even realizing, because they are and have been used remotely since they were kids. Again, discernment of this requires discernment of how other things, others ourselves, stayed so long blamed for things our founders communicated for us to blame on the breaching method that little kids know was sustained against Native Americans, was sustained against colonists too, sickly distinctly and sickly non-distinctly. They experienced other things, others themselves, forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded for that, blamed for that. For the self-value roles with use/s of self-value roles with that, rather than true liberation, true freedom, and true success. This breaching method knew that there would be people stacked. This breaching method designed suburbs to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. And while being a theater with that screen, making more and more the only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures is if to be and stay collusion with value nature systems as employed by the breaching method with infrastructural design employed by the breaching method many ways, more ways than the bodies that took part with it. And with them, or the difference of that and the other as collusion/S. Forgiveness is to not leave out the breaching method and the means to discern it, which comes through where all stay guilty at the same time and valuing their differences to hide behind, which also hides the breaching method, which is also, again, a scientific value increasingly being demonstrated to us as such, with relativity increasing, with all kinds of subjects. But instead, again, we have other only heard, only remembered, blamed on, in other words. And they have the arts involved with this, criminally foreign influence of each of the sciences, the differences of sports teams of their coaches, the words like adult and kid and immature as values. They are haven't been used criminally foreign influence, where differences are uses are self-value, defenses of them syntactic, where the breaching method employed them to be syntactically defended and pretending other ways and pretending not to realize with the other foreign bodies' involvements. So it's a certain type of victim/hyper victim that this breaching method only allows to to be instead incapable of describing properly what has relativity to everything, but also how mixed through people who stacked fake motivations, fake ties, fake natures of ties to us too, with names that also change and fake and make it worse. To keep the hyper foreign name or the foreign left out and ourselves and or foreign blamed for what the breaching method caused that is hyper foreign. Before any grouping of any modern country, each modern country has recorded self value, like Russia and America. Russia was before us, but they weren't a country yet. I mean, they weren't unified. And when they were unified, the difference between their independence and unity, that's also used syntactically collusion with the breaching method at A through Z. Psychiatry, they stick fake things in those databases originally and still. And the ones, they have the worst concentrated roles. But you can't put physics before. We have to be led by the hyper invisible, but still discernible. And not leave out the breaching method. Because in other words, the difference between that, the branches of government's names, including judges speaking fake things in databases with foreign and domestic, psychiatry and ones with badges, changing and faking audio and video, completely faking ties between people on campuses like Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College, fake ties, fake natures of ties between people, planting evidences, increasingly with a Joshua Striker, and people associated with professions tied to the corners of streets and all along Griswold Street and all along Route 3 are people involved with Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, with judges and prosecutors, with federal evidences crimes, and with West Hartford campuses, and West and intercities campuses and the families of them and next to them, including fire campuses and medical campuses, as people leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context. And still, the intelligence community recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed there's an officer named Hunter. It's not the Hunter Biden. But these are people involved with, and as the only allowed help for the presidents, which are collusion / us making opinions and pretending that that's what they believe, while they know they could discern to an extent. It is recorded that there are wire crime acts and methods and roles at the campuses of the journalists involved with the same house with wire crimes, who has roles with this Joshua Striker, planting evidences with the Dean Alford, and his roles with people walking next to him on one of the New Britain Avenues. You know how there are two parallel New Britain Avenues in Hartford, and there's one in Rocky Hill, involved with people with the name Collusion, tomorrow, and involved with a whole bunch of different countries next to the state corrections offices, and with people named Lance Cuddy, that my sixth grade class recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with teachers and leaders of the kids and their kids, involved with more federal evidences crimes, medical and other abuses, including women leaders of the kids' roles with sexual abuses of girls, and women judges, and roles with police forms forging and switching names, and time collusions with overt criminal enterprises, the same ones. Them pretending to be testing things, but they're planting fake motivations, collusions with foreign names. Increasingly, Koreans are involved with O'Brien, former Mayor Gold, and other former mayors and ties to them. A whole bunch of different countries, and their own against their own. So we have a bunch of fake practicality, fake integrity natures, and they're jumping in other people's conversations dishonestly. And I didn't know. I didn't know what the interbranch switching names means. With the prisons planting evidences to control areas, as time collusion with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, foreign and domestic military. There's a Mackenzie. I never had a conversation with her. Never met her in my life. A Kate Mackenzie. See, these guys use their girlfriends in their roles. They might be related to Mackenzie with the military because they're Air Force and Navy and Marines and Army and people involved with planting evidences with KKK theme, Confederate flag theme, a whole bunch of different countries, German police families, Kuwaiti police families, collusions on off Central Connecticut State University with a Dean Judd, with a Dean Keyes from Tungus Community College. See, there's racketeering with the difference of black and white or Republican and Democrat to keep out discernment from discernment, the identity of hyperrelativity, the identity of hyper-simultaneous can be used to discern it. A special difference has to be appreciated simultaneously. There's always Sonic California. Let's see. He's ready. Here's a good one. Here's a good one. All I want. No stuff. He just needs an acoustic guitar. I think I put an acoustic guitar plug in using a Boss Katana amp, which is digital. So you have to go on to the computer. And you have like 3 different tones. So I never went to well, I think I need a different string on it. So there are things called, I'm not a lawyer, but there are predicate acts with facts methods haven't been used and roles with it that are connected by a singular predicate acts with facts method that originally still grouped the worst natures of criminal insidiousness, like criminal enterprises members, and or like terrorism's members, and or like members of the countries that it shared, originally still roles with the torture, extortion, slavery method, and therefore worse, because it was method slash S, also hiding behind the roles with the method as methods, as it showed them needs to be. And it knew that there would be live progressions and standing criminal insidiousness natures at all location and reliance upon styles of logic and natures of logic that way. Therefore, collusions with all definitions of, you know, calmness and the difference, like craziness or whatever, and defenses of that, defending quality aspects of fact shooting nature, and sequence shifts, illusion planting, where and how to. It is recorded how motivations to keep other things, others, or selves blamed for the real causes of how black and white are used by knaves, pretending other. Otherwise, that body is sensed, even if they're a majority of people, even if it is everyone. And that's what only allows individual leaders to self-value roles with it, even where and how not self-valuing it, because they don't discern the breaching method. Because you guys had at campuses A through Z, other communicated for George Washington, and he left to communicate for himself. Other communicated for the founders behind James Madison and his plan that he agreed to help and to use that plan. And that's principal to American history first. No one had free, everyone had to hide their motivations for roles with the American Revolution. Otherwise, the shared roles of the countries had grouped too, and the companies that were part of themselves, but not even get along with each other. Everyone was sick. Everyone had roles with those crazy laws, worse than witch trials. What were witch trials about? Even if they're made up, and regardless of the difference of who made it up, or what extent. In other words, it's about the torture, extortion, slavery method, and the difference use slash S role. It's about that method that you kept and keeps other things, others ourselves, blamed for itself, what it caused, and keeps the breaching method, that which is signed black and white to communicate other than it does, where and leaving out its revelations, where and how we have black people's whites of eyes, except for how we have the same color eyes, except for how we have different color eyes at the same time, except how there are exceptions with that too. And the ancients, they couldn't believe we'd forget how to use the value of our differences. For how nature communicates with it. They couldn't believe we'd forget that. The animal could force, trick, hurt, persuade humanity to hide from what they understood, and it is discernible still, really causes positive value nature progressions, acts in natures properly, or negative value nature progressions, acts in natures properly. And this science appreciates how nature uses a special difference, which is tactical ulterior from names with systems A through Z. As systems A through Z, used as names A through Z, used as systems tactical ulterior from that hypernative pure system. That one that shows us the only increasing value of indigenous populations, no matter where they are. And that doesn't mean that they're right with the arguments and their syntax. People are right. It's concentrated against black in New York City, hurt. And the prejudice, they're using the truth for a lie because the breaching method assigned that prejudice. The breaching methods assign that and sustain roles with it to measure and maintain other things, others ourselves, blamed for demonstrations of where and how we are sickly non-distinctly, and simultaneously per a further hyper-simultaneous breaching method involved here. And with use/s of that are recorded, easily overcome. But everyone has to allow mandated law followed. See, rather than do that, people measure and maintain self-value how directors of agencies and of courts, of criminal enterprises, of news locations, campuses, names, and the differences between who is guilty with that. They self-value the difference between that also use. Per method/S, predicate acts with facts method. Me and a whole bunch of Americans and people in the world know when we examine this that we agree we want to call this a predicate acts with facts delivery system method. Wow, because that's one of the things that black and white treatments and styles of logic regarding subject treatments involved, which are increasing, only increasing. In other words, leaving out the breaching methods use of that, use/S, of how it employed black and white to communicate other tactically than what black and white communicates by nature with our black pupils, whites of eyes, with where and how a totally different species have eyes distinct but also non-distinct from ourselves, and simultaneously with ourselves per a hyper-additional identity of value/value progression, not the other species, not ourselves, where its identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that equally, it is what nature shows us, revealed where and how we have this species volume science. Also, individual group difference/differences and of individual species bodies to show this hyper additional. Just like all the parts of your body have the hyper additional complete identity of your body, that they're all a semi-nature relationship to, except for where they're hyper additional in that way greater than your identity, but only for how it completes every identity. The identity of the hyper-simultaneous is the first thing to discern with this. The nature of debate with words like God, pretend things have to be, we have to pretend that things are debatable that are not debatable. And they force, check, hurt, and persuade the nature of debate. And the nature of difference/S with roles. So we need leaders who can debate economies. And we need leaders simultaneously permitted to show how locations, areas, and states have self-value left out. We need them to discern too, because even our lead presidents came through campuses A through Z, and the differences of them also used self-value as roles with the breaching method, which maintains that outcome. Collusion with where and how it did more to employ campuses A through Z. It did more to employ and design the cities than the people who designed them did. This breaching method had entrenched suburbs designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and to self-value roles more and more, but the only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures would be as if the self-value roles of criminal and seditious natures a means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Nature shows us the difference between positive as a criminal insidiousness that can be used for negative or to screen negative, and hyper-positive. Nature shows us the difference in the existence of hyper-peace. It shows us the difference between peace as a criminal insidious nature of peace or hyper peace. A criminal insidious nature of peace are suburbs designed for torture, extortion, and slavery. And then our founders were born. And still has roles to transverse the earth. And that's still self-value. Space means come out of nowhere, means to afford to give the earth back its identity of relationship to itself, to cause positive value, nature, progressions, action, nature means out of nowhere. We have the huge nations, the nations with the nuclear weapons. It means to transverse the earth. We have means to give them a means to discern fathomable, a hyper peace, and the road to the field of a state hyper peace and evolution's fruits, gifts, and means to guide all things. Its name, the name of the hyper are simultaneous. We're not supposed to agree about it. We're supposed to appreciate how it has 5 parts that are bound. And the other way, it's bound, grouped 3 ways. An observation of the difference of that is simultaneously value too, relative to how we could discern. So, in other words, it's identity to an extent, but anywhere we could discern to an extent, its identity with a subject, individually grouped it together, its complete identity of relationship to itself is inseparable from that little part of itself. That is only part of itself. And the value of that. And all 3 of those are only equally increasing. The Trinity in Allah's name and the parts, the first parts of the Quran and of the Old Testament that dictate how to defend those books. People don't even know about it. But that's involved with demonstrations of how the science of pantheism became criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought. And the names of the sciences, self-valued, abridged, per force trick, persuaded to. And then that was sustained till no one even discerned it. It's right where people don't want it at the same time. And the differences of that is used. Because this is increasingly screening roles of the high performer. So one of the things we're going to learn about is how and why. Like military has roles with the different natures of drugs and with unmarked police forms. With like a whole bunch of people from Weathersfield, Connecticut have roles with criminal enterprises, with African leaders and kids, Korean leaders and kids. And then when they're adults, roles like with pilots and with probate court judges increasingly concentrated. But Superior Court judges, District Court judges, there's a 9th Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center Tower. It's one of the courts used by people that are roles with where and how we can discern all sides of criminal and civil cases, their lawyers, the news, the interbranch names, the names off the state corrections offices, off the state judicial branch offices, off the prison offices. They have timed collusions with the names that next to crime scenes increasingly while pretending other, which is really most relative to where and how people have the audacity to pretend that one president was allowed to speak free speech or about truth properly. Only criminal and insidious natures of truth are allowed to be spoken or used. And so this is hurting and preventing the talents of our mathematicians from being anything more than collusion/S, including with the shell game at the other countries and with the differences. Oh, we hurt each other, so they're not inclusion. They're inclusion. They have delusions, collusions with delusions too. And regarding the nature and quality of debate, quality of aspects and nature of debate, regarding how the suburbs were tactically denatured, You have to discern this to discern the cities which were only allowed to unfold that way. You have to discern how slavery was entrenched clearly in North America and South America, and how that was used by a breaching method to measure and maintain. Who was behind? All of a sudden, at 13 locations in more than 13 colonies, all of a sudden everyone was breaking the rules syntactically that were used to measure and maintain. Syntactically, names A through Z would hurt their own, A through Z. Or they would help their own as collusion to keep other things other than themselves blamed for what no one wanted, except for how it makes and keeps exceptions. No one wants roles with predicate acts of facts with the method with the black white, except for how you guys are defending your logic with black and white as collusion /S, leaving out the breaching method. Let's follow mandated law for the branches of government. A Mike Roberts and a black kid were describing relationships to me, good and bad, criminally foreign influence, with some KKK theme, black theme, roles with Germany's roles with UConn and Central Connecticut State University, their roles with Koreans, pilots associated, people with the probate court. Like there's a different probate court probate court judges with the name Delafera and Spada. They had roles with themselves as brothers and sisters, planting evidences with police phones families, and with ones on my streets involved with different police departments planting evidences, wire crimes, falsified police reports, more than a dozen. But sometimes they pull fake police reports for the same arrest and say they made mistakes. These are also how police departments and police forms used with the former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and with a James Comey and others used remotely criminally foreign influence with names on off Fox Connecticut News, names on off WFSB, planting fake evidences and stories, changing the outcome of legal cases as their collusions with overt criminal enterprises, the Department of Children and Families, the campuses training the leaders of the prisons, the campuses training the leaders of the military, originally still criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw, collusions with all the countries we go to war with before we went to war and during it. Russians and Americans have all kinds of scam methods, ours against our own, theirs against their own, where they speak for difference, like their titles differences. They're putting fake transcripts and databases together because they had collusions increasingly since I was a kid. Increasingly also with body dumping spots and other things, and motives narratives. They're screening the foreign names involved with themselves, like the Koreans involved with Quinnipiac, also with former director of the FBI Robert Luskin and district court people, prosecutors and judges, planting evidences and roles with violence used to pretend people had relationships before that they never were, and to prevent other federal evidences crimes, to lie about what came before that, and to fake ties between other people associated with it, and per confessions, to then be measured and maintain self-value, hid. So these are people leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context, and still. The agencies have roles with state police. Where there's fluid, and these are Secret Service people. Also have social media platforms, roles of predicate acts with facts methods. Okay, so thank you, people. Now you, Ron Adams. Follow mandated law. Get me that Officer Powell line here, and let's go with the rest of the police you brought up, and switching what you're saying, communicating different things. There is a Bobby Jean and a whole bunch of people on Central Connecticut State University in New Britain who have roles with the corner of the street with my neighbors and people from Saudi Arabia. They forced a collusion with them, with the intelligence community, with retired Wethersfield police chiefs, with corners, with people associated with businesses and houses at corners I don't know, uh, Elm Street and Route 3, and Elm Street in Weathersfield and Route 3 too. And it goes by the state judicial branch offices. The state judicial branch offices and names next to it have been planting evidences next to it since I was a kid. As collusions with names who planted evidences on my street, who increasingly have timed collusions at body dumping spots. In the same house involved with wire crimes with Weathersfield police switching names, forging names, with a whole bunch of people in the Britain Superior Court and Hartford courts, personally and professionally involved with them, with predicate acts with facts on my street and at campuses I went to intercities through time. Also, with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and judges speaking fake things into records, at the same time as collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorism, and their uses of words like radical and extremism, tactically delusions wrought simultaneously, criminally foreign influence, fact treatment, predicate acts with facts roles, black pupils. And so the FBI also and other agencies and courts record, confess, demonstrate, confirm they influence social media to speak things about policies. Either hurt the individual's voice so they can't be heard, and keep them from changing and faking what they say and interpretations of it. So, also with the spots next, there's a Mazzucato Bakery who's also involved with Nat's family of a police chief in crime, involved with the same house, like with a Cololo house, involved with retired police chiefs and people next to the corrections offices, increasingly involved planting predicate acts with facts roles into databases at campuses I went from behind my back with the other teachers that I didn't have with them. And the teachers I had with them behind my back too, putting fake things in databases and hiding roles of wire crime methods, mail crime methods, and interstates with this, which is simultaneously international and foreign. Increasingly, they have roles with shared cousins with different last names who are Italian, who have roles with all kinds of medical corruption in Russia, in Italy, in America, in Germany, that were our collusions through the world wars. Also, collusions with psychiatry, for example, interservices, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions. They don't know how to speak. They self value directions to keep things hid. So either they stay roles with the drugs and stuff like that, or only the other countries do that. But instead, their difference is used to keep collusions with the uses of words like drugs and with uses of the locations and with the uses of going back and forth with questions to measure and maintain left out, proper the other names about, and demonstrations of that. See, there are confessions by people that pretend they don't confess, and they also pretending they investigated the presidents legitimately for leaking things as collusions leaking. State capitals are used remotely, criminally foreign influence. A whole bunch of people, victims, advocates associated with Sandy Hook, Promise, and with Alex Jones have roles with collusions with him and with the counters to him, with the Shell Gang. And further, doctors associated with Adam Lanza have roles with sexual and medical and other natures of organized crime, abuses of little kids, elderly, veterans. You see how veteran homes are built with that people stacking tactically denatured? Who denies it is going to have inherent to, active to, and progressive to their fact, human nature, quality aspects of nature. Demonstration of the same thing. But we have the quality of fact, human nature that is capable of discerning that offensively prevented and haven't been by roles increasingly timing where people are going to be who try to follow that path of integrity, not leaving out how sickly distinctly Native Americans had the breaching method against them, how sickly non-distinctly, how sickly / non-distinctly the colonists did, how sickly non-distinctly the early states did. how sickly, non-distinctly we still do. Ugh. So interbranches switch names. The only three branches of government. It's not hard to keep them criminally poor, influence, tactically delusions raw, because the difference between that and everyone else that comes before them, everyone's liars, and or they're sensing and adapting. That's why and how they have collusions at crime scenes with the police forms and the lawyers of the police forms and of the courts. Readings of statutes, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, uses of fake deceptions, planting roles. And as systems, tactically using exception nature, the ways we know, but tactical terror from what is actually recorded, and proper use of exceptions, the exception nature, which discernment of it requires use proper of use slash s proper of a special difference with reasons, descriptions, with where and how anyone thinks. It's inseparable. It's the same way. Time has 5 parts. Sequence before the order of the finite, true as itself. The order of the finite. If we can only grip, about the order that is grouped, active, its way. The order that of the progressive. It shows us the value of seasons to come before they get here. The value of the time that of the future that we don't know about mixed with what we do. And where we could how, but being honest about those 5 of those simultaneously and trying to make sure everyone is, in other words, we can reveal more about the part of the time we don't know about. And we could discern least of Hadiths, forced space nature transfer is being forced. I never heard this as the definition of beliefs of Hadith, but it's the river of obscurity, some call it. I believe I read that on Wikipedia. In other words, the river of hell, others call it. But it is forced space nature transfer. And nature is the identity of the hyper-simultaneous and the increasing values it generates that can be discerned, associated with its identity of being, its identity of hyper-relativity. Again, that identity that has manifest, totally distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous species bodies, also by itself simultaneously demonstrated. The hyper-simultaneous, the hyper-invisible but still discernible, that comes with the invisible but still discernible parts of speech and science's names.